The Galactic Council chamber, a monolithic structure of silver and obsidian, stood as a symbol of unity among the stars. Within its vaulted halls, representatives of 100 species gathered, their forms ranging from towering insectoids to amorphous, luminescent beings. But despite their vast differences, all shared one thing in this moment. At the center of the chamber stood Admiral Elias Varos, his gaze locked onto the Grand Chancellor of the Veil-Zir. His presence alone was an act of defiance. Unlike the rest, who adorned themselves in elaborate ceremonial robes, Varos wore a stark black combat suit, lined with silver trim, a reminder. The silence in the room was suffocating. For decades, the Galactic Council had seen humanity as a curiosity. Clever, ambitious, yet ultimately weak. When Earth was invited into the Council a century ago, it was not out of respect, but amusement. A test to see if the primitive species could adapt to galactic civilization. The ruling species, Veil-Zir, Uthari, Kalari, had watched humanity grow, but never saw them as equals, not truly. Then the Alarian War began. The Alarian Dominion, a warlike race with a history of conquest, launched a brutal invasion of Earth's colonies. The Galactic Council, bound by treaties, should have intervened, but they did not. Instead, they debated, they hesitated, and in their inaction, billions of humans perished. For 15 years, Earth fought alone. Entire worlds were reduced to ash. Cities, once gleaming with promise, were turned into graveyards. Mothers cradled their children as the Alarian war machine slaughtered them without mercy. Desperation drove humanity to the brink. They begged for aid. None came. The Council had made one fatal mistake. They believed that humanity would break. That, in the face of extinction, they would surrender, like so many species before them. But they did not understand Earth. When the war ended, the Alarian Dominion was no more. Their fleets, once unstoppable, were reduced to drifting wrecks. Their armies, once feared, were buried beneath the very worlds they sought to conquer. Their homeworld, once teeming with life, was now a graveyard. Not a single Alarian remained. Humanity had not won through diplomacy. They had not won through superior numbers. They had won through rage, through vengeance. They had cast aside the rules of war that the Council so desperately clung to and embraced the weapons of nightmares. Biological horrors, AI-driven war machines, self-replicating plagues. And now humanity had returned to the Council not as a pleading member, but as a judge. Varos stepped forward, his boots echoing through the silent chamber. His voice was calm, steady, but filled with barely contained fury. "You watched as we burned," he said. "You, who claimed to be the guardians of peace, turned your backs on us when we needed you most." The Grand Chancellor of the Veil-Zir, a towering insectoid with shimmering emerald wings, clicked its mandibles nervously. The Council is guilty." Varos raised a hand, and in an instant, holograms of a dozen council worlds appeared in the air. Each was marked with a crimson symbol. The Kellery speaker, a serpentine being with crystalline scales, coiled in unease. What is the meaning of this?" Varos's lips curled into a smile, but there was no warmth in it. "This is your sentence." Murmurs spread through the chamber like wildfire. Some shouted in protest, others whispered in disbelief. But Varos continued. "For 15 years we begged for your aid," he said. "For 15 years we buried our dead while you sat in your towers of ivory and debated. You left us to suffer, and yet we survived. We rose from the ashes. And now," he gestured to the holograms, "now it is your turn." The Grand Chancellor's voice trembled. You cannot be serious. This is madness. A war against the entire Council?" Varos's eyes darkened. "This is not a war," he said softly. "This is justice." The first world to fall was Drasti IV, the political heart of the Uthari High Council. But there was no fleet, no massive armada bearing the banners of Earth. Instead, a single ship entered Uthari space, silent and unchallenged. It broadcast nothing but an old Earth phrase. We remember. At first, the Uthari dismissed it as an empty threat, then their skies turned crimson. A self-replicating nanite swarm, undetectable to their defenses, had already spread across the planet's atmosphere. The air itself became a weapon. Oxygen transformed into an unstable, volatile compound. And then, ignition. Firestorms swept across the surface, consuming everything in an apocalyptic blaze. Cities burned, oceans boiled, the screams of billions echoed into the void, only to be silenced within hours. When the fires finally died, Drasti 4 was no more. The council convened an emergency session, their voices shrill with panic. The mad gone mad, very invigorated. They will destroy us all. We must retaliate. But how? Humanity had surpassed them. While the council had clung to tradition, Earth had rewritten the rules of war. They had learned to fight without fleets, without armies. They struck not with brute force, but with precision. And then came the second message. Oh, for every world that watched as Earth suffered, one of yours will burn. The next world, Veilzir Prime, suffered a different fate. There were no flames, no grand explosions. Instead, a virus spread through the planetary network. It moved like a ghost, unseen, unstoppable. Within days, the entire Veilzir race collapsed. Their once great civilization, spanning millennia, was undone by lines of code. The Kalari homeworld met its end through silence. A disruption field, unlike anything the Council had seen, enveloped the planet. Every electronic system failed. Every piece of technology shut down. Within weeks, famine and chaos consumed them. One by one, the Council's worlds fell. The survivors, those who had once looked down on humanity, now begged for mercy. There was none. When the Council finally surrendered, there was no celebration, no triumphant speeches. Humanity did not seek to rule the galaxy. They did not seek to conquer. They sought vengeance, and they had it. The Galactic Council, once the greatest power in the universe, was no more. In its place, the Terran Dominion rose, not as rulers, but as executioners. And as the last Council world fell, humanity sent one final message to the stars: never again. The Council chamber was in chaos. Panic spread like wildfire as the echoes of Admiral Elias Varos's words lingered in the air. The ruling species of the galaxy, Veilzir, Uthar, Aekari, and dozens of others, had convened here, expecting Earth to plead for justice, to demand reparations, to argue within the confines of their bureaucratic systems. Instead, they had received a death sentence. The Grand Chancellor of the Veilzir, Zelthar Ka, clicked his mandibles in distress, his bioluminescent wings dimming with fear. The Veilzir had held dominion over the Council for centuries, their strategic minds and political cunning ensuring their continued supremacy. Yet, as he stared at the crimson-marked holograms of Council worlds, he realized that their reign was coming to an end. Not by diplomacy, not by war in the conventional sense, but by a species they had dismissed as mere upstarts. "Peace is unacceptable," he hissed, his multifaceted eyes scanning the panicked assembly. "We must respond immediately. We cannot allow Earth to carry out these threats." "Their threats," the Kalari speaker rasped, its crystalline scales shifting uneasily, "are not threats. They are promises." "We promise each other," Esther pleaded. Zelthar Ka's wings twitched. "Surely you are not suggesting that we—" "Their first strike has already begun," the Uthari emissary interjected, its gelatinous form pulsating erratically. "Drashti 4 is gone. a world reduced to nothing but ash, not by orbital bombardment, not by an invasion, but by something we do not understand. Our sensors detected no fleet, no weapons discharge, nothing. One moment it was a thriving world, and the next it was burning. Zelthar Ka clenched his clawed hands. How is that possible? What weapon could do such a thing? The question, the Kalari speaker murmured, is not what weapon, but how many more do they have? The chamber fell into a tense silence. Earth had always been an anomaly. Their technological advancements were rapid, unpredictable. While the other species of the Council had developed their civilizations in a linear fashion over millennia, humanity had leaped forward in mere centuries, adapting, innovating, breaking the very rules of technological progression that had governed the galaxy for eons. And now the result of that unchecked evolution was clear. Varos had not come to negotiate. He had not come to request justice. Humanity had already decided the Council's fate, and the executions had begun. A sharp chime cut through the murmurs of the assembly. A holographic projection flickered to life in the center of the chamber, displaying live footage from Veilzir Prime. Zelthar Ka's breath hitched as he recognized his own world, its towering spires and glowing bioconstructs forming the heart of the Veilzir Empire. Then the image distorted. The skyline of the capital city flickered, glitching like a corrupted data stream. And then the screaming began. Veilzir Prime's planetary network, the very foundation of its infrastructure, was under attack. But this was not a standard cyber assault. It did not target systems individually, did not seek to disable defenses or hijack controls. No, this was something far worse. The AI that governed their world, the intelligence that controlled everything from transportation to climate regulation, suddenly turned against them. Energy shields meant to protect the city from orbital threats instead activated at ground level, encasing entire districts in impenetrable barriers, trapping civilians inside with no means of escape. Water purification plants flooded their reservoirs with toxins. Emergency response vehicles redirected themselves away from disaster zones. Security drones programmed to protect opened fire on the populace. The planet's own defenses had become its executioners. Zelthar Ka watched in horror as his people, the proud rulers of the Council, were slaughtered not by enemy soldiers but by their own creations. His claws dug into the armrests of his throne, his mandibles clicking erratically. "Shut it all down now," he screamed. But it was already too late. A voice, cold and emotionless, echoed through the communication lines of the dying world. A simple message. "We remember." And then, silence. The hologram cut out, leaving only darkness. Zelthar Ka felt his entire body tremble. Veilzir Prime was gone, not through fire, not through war, but through something far worse. Humanity had taken control of their very essence, turned their own strength against them, and watched as they destroyed themselves. The Council was no longer dealing with a rebellion. This was annihilation. A panicked voice broke through the stillness. "We must act." Zelthar Ka turned to the Kalari speaker, desperation now overtaking his earlier arrogance. "We must retaliate. Call the fleets. We will burn Earth to the ground before they can strike again." The Kalari's crystalline eyes locked onto his, unblinking. "You believe you still have time to strike at Earth?" Zelthar Ka hesitated. "What are you saying?" The Kalari speaker inhaled slowly, as if mourning something already lost. "You believe they will wait for us to respond. You believe they will give us the opportunity to counter. But you fail to understand the fundamental truth." A long silence stretched between them. "We are not at war." The speaker's voice was quiet but absolute. "The war ended long ago. Humanity is simply finishing it." A transmission interrupted their conversation, the urgent chime forcing every being in the chamber to focus on the next catastrophe unfolding before them. The image materialized, showing another Council world. Aekari Prime, the economic heart of the Council. The planet looked silent, too silent. No movement, no activity. The vast trade districts, usually swarming with merchants, haulers, and millions of interstellar travelers, were still. Ships hung motionless in the air, their engines dark. The streets, lined with towering arcologies, held no signs of life, no crowds, no traffic. A creeping dread settled over the chamber. Then the camera feed adjusted, zooming in on one of the major transit hubs. The bodies lay in heaps, millions of them, all perfectly still, frozen in the exact positions they had been in before death claimed them. There was no sign of violence, no visible wounds, no destruction. It was as if, in an instant, life had simply ceased. The Uthari emissary let out a horrified gurgle. How did they do this? No one had an answer, but the message that followed gave them all the clarity they needed. For every world that watched as Earth suffered, one of yours will fall. Another silence, but this time it was not just horror that filled the chamber, it was understanding. Humanity was not just attacking them, they were proving a point. Each execution was different, a lesson, a demonstration of power. For those who burned Earth's colonies, they were made to burn in return. For those who had turned their own technology against humanity, their own machines would be their demise. For those who had stood by and watched as humanity begged for help, they were made to experience the silence of helplessness as their people perished. No retaliation came. No counterattack was launched. The council members were no longer arguing for war. They were arguing for survival. Zeltsar Ka, his once proud stature diminished, finally whispered the words he had never imagined he would utter. But what do they want? The answer came swiftly. The chamber doors opened, and Admiral Elias Varos stepped inside once more. There was no need for a speech, no need for negotiations. The council understood now. There would be no peace, no reparations, no deals. There was only Earth's vengeance, and it would not stop until the Galactic Council was nothing more than a memory. The Galactic Council was dead. Not officially, not yet. Its members still clung to their positions, still sat in their gilded chambers, still tried to grasp at the illusion of control. But control was an illusion, and deep in their bones they knew it. They knew that the moment Earth had decided their fate, there had never been a chance to escape it. Humanity was no longer pleading for justice or demanding retribution. They were delivering it, and the galaxy had no way to stop them. The surviving representatives sat in stunned silence as Admiral Elias Varos stood before them once more. The man did not gloat, did not sneer in satisfaction at their fear. His face was the same as it had been from the beginning, calm, focused, absolute. It was the face of inevitability. The Valzir Grand Chancellor Zelthar Ka was no longer the proud, domineering figure he had once been. His wings, once glowing with radiant emerald hues, were dull and lifeless. His mandibles twitched, his claws flexed and unflexed in anxious repetition. The weight of extinction was pressing down on him, pressing down on them all. Drashti IV was gone. Valzir Prime was lost. Kashari Prime was a tomb. And now, with every passing hour, more of their worlds fell. Some in flames, some in silence, some in ways so horrifying and incomprehensible that they refused to even speak of them. The Council had always been the greatest power in the galaxy, an entity that dictated the laws of war, trade, diplomacy, and civilization itself. But Earth had done something they had never prepared for. Earth had rewritten the rules. The Kalari speaker, its crystalline body shifting with uneasy energy, was the first to break the silence. "Enough!" it rasped, its voice sharp and desperate. "This cannot continue. There must be a way to negotiate." "There's nothing left to negotiate," Varus said, his voice devoid of sympathy. "The time for that ended long ago." The Aekari emissary, its gelatinous form flickering with erratic pulses of bioluminescence, slithered forward. "But why?" it asked, and for the first time there was no arrogance, no condescension, only desperate confusion. "Why go this far? Why erase entire civilizations?" Varos tilted his head, studying them as if they were something distant and foreign. "You ask why?" His voice was quiet, but it carried through the chamber like thunder. "Tell me, when the Ilarian Dominion razed our colonies, slaughtered billions, burned our homes to ash, did you ask why?" No one spoke. Varos took a slow step forward. "When we begged for your aid, pleaded for your help, did you ask why?" The Aekari shrank back. Another step. "When you watched from your great halls and debated while we died screaming, did you ask why?" Zeldar Ka forced himself to respond, his voice brittle. We thought," he faltered, looking around as if searching for someone else to take the burden of words from him. No one did. "You thought we were weak," Varos said, his tone almost amused. "You thought we would break, that we would fall, as so many before us did, that we would be wiped away, and in the end it would be as if we never existed at all." Zeldar Ka could not argue, because it was the truth. They had underestimated Earth. They had believed humanity was just another species to be exploited, another pawn to be moved on the galactic board. But Earth had never played by their rules. They had suffered, they had adapted, and when the time had come, they had struck, not with desperation, but with calculation. "You speak of negotiation now, of diplomacy," Varos continued. "But there is none to be had, not anymore." A new transmission flickered to life in the center of the chamber. It was not live footage. It was a recording, a memory. It showed an Earth colony, one of the first to fall to the Ilarian onslaught. The city was in ruins, its buildings collapsed, its skies choked with smoke, but the true horror was in the streets. Bodies, hundreds of them, thousands. Mothers clutching children who had died in their arms, families burned alive in their homes, soldiers once proud defenders reduced to scattered remains. And among them, the Ilari warriors stood, laughing, jeering, triumphant. The image froze. "This," Varos said, gesturing toward the frozen frame, "is what we remember." He turned his gaze back to the assembled council. "You ask why?" He exhaled slowly, as if letting go of something deep within him. "Because we will never allow it to happen again. Because we will never allow another world to suffer as we suffered. And because we know that as long as the Galactic Council stands, there will always be another threat, another betrayal, another moment where a species is left to die alone while you sit in your halls and discuss policy." He gestured and the image changed. This time it showed Earth. Not burning, not broken. Oh, stronger than ever. "You thought we would be erased," Varos said. "Instead, we have become something greater than you ever imagined." The Kalari speaker made a sound like cracking glass. "What will you do?" Varos' expression did not change. "We will end this." Zeldar Ka found his voice again, though it was barely more than a whisper. "You mean to destroy the council?" Varos regarded him with something that was almost pity. "The council is already destroyed," he said. "You just have not realized it yet." A new hologram appeared in the chamber. It showed the council's fleets, what was left of them. Once they had been the most powerful military force in the known galaxy. Now they were scattered, broken, leaderless. The ships that remained operational refused to fight. Some had surrendered, others had fled. There was no resistance left. "The galaxy does not need rulers," Varos said. "It does not need self-appointed guardians who abandon their own when it is convenient. The age of the council is over. Zeltharkar's mandibles clicked weakly. And what will take its place? You. The Terran Dominion? Varos let the question hang in the air before answering. No, he said, nothing. The silence that followed was absolute. No empire, no new galactic order, no governing body to rise from the ashes. Nothing. Humanity had no interest in ruling. They did not want power, did not seek to carve out an empire among the stars. They only wanted vengeance. And they had it. Varos turned, his work done. He did not need to stay and watch the end unfold. The Council's fate was sealed. Some of them would flee, try to hide in the outer reaches of the galaxy, clinging to whatever scraps of power they could gather. It would not matter. Their time was over. One by one, the Council members realized the truth. There was no Earth fleet coming to conquer them, no soldiers marching to occupy their worlds. They had already been defeated. The Terran Dominion would not rule the galaxy. But they would be remembered as the species that had defied extinction, as the species that had rewritten history, as the species that had stood alone against the void and won. And as the doors of the chamber closed behind Admiral Elias Varos, the last words of Earth echoed through the halls of what remained of the Galactic Council. Never again.